Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of 2023 for the Maple Leafs Lounge. We hope you had a fantastic holiday and a happy new year. Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Peter Baracchini, as always, joined by my colleague over at the Hockey Writers, Shane Seney. Shane, happy New Year's. All the best to you. Hope you had a great holiday, my friend.
I did. Yeah. Happy New Year to you too, Peter. As you can see, I had to represent after the World Juniors. So, it was a great tournament, but happy to turn the calendar and creep a little closer to the trade deadline, which is my favorite time of the year.
It's basically Christmas or, 2.0, 3.0, whatever you want to call it. Nothing is a dull moment in the hockey universe. And obviously, congrats to Team Canada for winning back-to-back World Junior golds. Obviously, there's a player by Connor Bedard who played really, really well. If you haven't checked him out, then you're missing out because he is the real deal for this year's NHL draft. And before we kick off this episode, be sure to check out the Hockeypedia pages over at the Hockey Writers. Want to take a look at teams' histories, stats, rosters, management, you name it, we have it all for your knowledge over at the Hockey Writers. Be sure to check out the team pages for your favorites, team that you represent from the NHL. Kicking off the first topic for 2023 is something that we probably should have expected from the start, but then again, may just be a little bit overreaction from us, media, fans, whatever you want to call it, but goalie concerns. After a hot start from both Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov, tended to cool down just before and after the break with their 4 games that they played before, the back-to-backs against the Detroit Red Wings and Philadelphia Flyers. They sort of cooled off with some, less than stellar performances. Shane, obviously we want them to succeed. Obviously you expect them to have that bounce back performance and find that consistency, but should there be concern in Leafland about that little stretch from Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov? Or is it just one of those things where, things happen with goalies and then they tend to bounce back as we saw against the Red Wings and Flyers?
I would say there should be a little bit of concern for sure. I don't think Matt Murray's won back-to-back starts since the start of December. So I looked back at their last 5 starts and both of them are like hovering around 840 or 860, to 880 save percentage. So for the year, they're both around that 915 mark, which we want to see, but the last 5 starts have been worrisome. So, they look good in the back-to-backs, but let's remind ourselves who they're playing. But, I'd be a little bit concerned. I mean, if this goes on for the next, few weeks, then there's going to be a lot of concern considering that they're kind of stuck with these 2 guys. The market's pretty thin when it comes to goalies who are available, and they seem committed to both of them. So I wouldn't worry too much. Samsonov seemed to put in a little bit extra work there before his last start, and it seemed to have paid off. Murray, on the other hand, I would worry a little bit more about. Just given his track record and the fact that he hasn't been great in back-to-back starts. So, I'm a little bit concerned. And, leading up to March, I think Leafs Nation should be keeping these guys on close watch because it's going to start and finish with these guys. So hopefully it works out for the best.
Yeah, you alluded to, and I also mentioned at the top of the show, their save percentages before those 2 games were very worrisome. Samsonov against Washington, Philadelphia, and both games against St. Louis, both his save percentages were way below 890, 821, 842, 882, and 844. Murray tended to have 2 good performances against the Lightning and Avalanche, but still that 810 and 808 against Seattle was very concerning. You also mentioned, Shane, the trade deadline, how the market is very bare. Obviously, they have faith in them from the very start. We've been not necessarily, let's say we've been, pumping them up a little bit. Maybe we should pump the brakes on the tires just a little bit. But you know what? They looked great. And from the second half, based on what we saw last season with Jack Campbell and Peter Mrazek, do you still have faith in this tandem? Or like you alluded to, do you maybe try and make another deal to find some reassurance? Or do you call up Joseph Woll, who's been looking very sharp in the AHL should something happen?
I think if one of these guys was the starter and was kind of running with the minutes, then you might consider bringing up Woll, who could kind of, alleviate some of that pressure. But since Keefe goes back and forth with these guys, I don't really think minutes are an issue or load management. So to me, you just ride them out. And Dubas kind of put all his eggs in the basket, and now he's going to sit back and see what happens. So hopefully they can get back on track where they're winning those 4 or 5 games in a row each, and the Leafs are back to dominating. But let's be honest, they're still near the top of the Eastern Conference. Their overall numbers are great. It's just been the last, 4 or 5 games each. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. And there's maybe Cam Talbot, Korpisalo at Columbus. There's Cal Peterson for the Kings, but those aren't long-term options or short-term options if I'm the Maple Leafs.
No, definitely. And I think the big thing that we should all take from this, and you even talked about, is how Samsonov had that bounce back performance and how he put in the work, as David Alter reported that during that time off when he wasn't playing, he worked with Curtis Sanford and even Mike Zeisberger from NHL.com. He tweeted out how much Samsonov cared, how he was in that locker room by himself in his stall for about 10 minutes before he even talked to the media, showing how he needs to be better. And I think if they have that mindset and have that ability to regroup and bounce back from these type of stretches, that's going to be huge, because that was missing from this team last year. And if they're able to pull through and get focused mentally, then it's going to be a good run down the stretch, because I'd be reminiscing if we didn't get that consistency down the stretch last season. But now hopefully this should be a good sign heading forward.
The only thing I see, Peter, is let's say they stick it out with these 2 guys the whole way, which it does look like that's going to be the case. Keith's not going to go back and forth in the playoffs. So to me, it's I feel like that's got to be solved and, put to bed long before game 1 come the spring. So I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to play out with, who gets to start game 1.
Quick rapid fire question. Who would you start in game 1 if the playoffs started today?
Matt Murray. And I've liked Samsonov's game better of late too. And I'm just saying that because he's got jewelry and nobody else on that team's got 2 rings. So, you go with the guy that's been there before. And if he, if obviously if he's struggling down the stretch, you might reconsider. But given his piece of work this year overall and with his resume, then you kind of lean on that guy.
Definitely can't argue with the 2 cup rings. I would tend to agree. Although last season in the playoffs, Samsonov did, manage to play at his best when he was called upon. So there is that reassurance should something happen. And that's why they got both of them in that instance. Moving on to our next topic. It was a great week, although maybe not so much for the Maple Leafs record, but for the Maple Leafs 2-star players. Auston Matthews became the fastest Maple Leaf to 500 points after he scored a goal, or he recorded, I believe it was the assist in against the St. Louis Blues. Yes, it was with the assist, just clarifying on that. It was the assist, and then he went to 501 with the goal. And then days later, Mitch Marner got to 500 points, making him the second fastest behind Auston Matthews. So really impressive production from both the Maple Leafs young guns or star players at this point. Shane, what do you make of this between Matthews or Marner, whoever you want to take? What do you make of this kind of production from these 2-star players? And they're just basically in the prime of their career at this point.
It seems like they're just getting started, which is crazy now that they've already reached 500 points each. And to me, it's like they really have a chance to be special here and as part of the franchise and, find themselves on Legends Row, once their career is over. And Elliot Friedman made a great point about Matthews. And there's been so much talk already about, does he end up in LA, New York, Arizona? What happens when, in a couple of years? But Friedman made a great point where Matthews really cares about franchise records and history books. And he sees his name up there against some of the best and biggest names that the NHL has ever seen. And Toronto's, to me, still the mecca of hockey and when it comes to this universe. So I think he puts a lot of stock into that. And because of that, I could see him sticking around, but that's a total topic for another day. But I was great to see. I'm happy they're both kind of can enjoy the moment these last couple of weeks together. And let's hope they stick around here long term. And I think the Leafs will be, in a great spot in, let's say, 10 years if both of these guys re-up one more time and hang around to smash even more franchise records.
I should note that maybe because of the stretch of games between Matthews and Marner took Marner 467 games, he may not be the second fastest, but I'm pretty sure when I heard it on the broadcast it was, but I will double check on that, and I may need to correct myself next week. So I'll put an asterisk beside. I put a little note beside there. That way we can fact check and make sure everything is all good. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like you said, I mean, it's just absolutely phenomenal with what Matthews and Marner have been able to accomplish, and just mere days apart from one another. I thought, there was a chance that maybe both of them could try and hit the mark together, because Marner was like 2 or 3 points off when Matthews hit it. So the fact that he was able to do it just days apart. And I think what gets me too is, had a little fun with it. Matthew was about to toss the puck over to the stands to try and like shed a little fear in Mitch Marner's eyes. But you know what? That's how they operate. They have that kind of chemistry. They're really great friends on and off the ice. They have that mentality and they can joke around with each other. So I think with them in place, the fact that they're already cemented themselves in Maple Leaf history right now, I think they want to add more to that. And we know that points are, individual accolades are important, but we've heard Matthews time and time again said that, yeah, it was great that he won the Rocket last year, but it's not enough. He wants that cup. He wants more success in the playoffs when it matters. And we saw that last season against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and everyone's going to say, oh, they still lost. It was a much better performance from both Matthews and Marner. And I think with the steps that they're taking right now, how they're dialed in and how consistent they have been from October till now, it's a really great sign. And again, kind of like goaltending, we still need to see a little bit more, but with these two guys, we know for sure that they're going to have everything on the line from here on out to the very end, and they're going to say their best for the playoffs. Yeah,
too, Peter. It's like you look in Pittsburgh or you look in Washington or wherever, and they always say if they have Malkin and Crosby, they have a chance. Mm-hmm. And I think with Toronto, it's the exact same thing. Even if, Tavares plays out his contract and doesn't stick around, or if Nylander, moves out because there's no money for him, if they can keep Matthews and Marner in the mix, they got a chance. So let's hope whoever's leading the team next year or the year after can get that done.
Absolutely. And I am looking at a tweet on Sportsnet. Auston Matthews, fastest to 500 points, 445. Mitch Marner was at 467. And the next fastest was Matt Sundin and Rick Vaive, 495. So Mitch Marner is the second fastest Maple Leaf to get that. But yeah, absolutely. Huge congrats to Mitch and Auston that they were able to accomplish that feat in a span of a week. Obviously, Mitch Marner got the win in his game. Matthews didn't. That was kind of a toss-up, but I'm glad that the Maple Leafs made that push against the St. Louis Blues to try and get back into that game. But, it is what it is. But now much more important things are on their mind in the second half. All right, to take a quick break, this show is brought to you by Sports Fan Side Hustle, a new digital course that teaches passionate sports fans how to make a lucrative side income off of their love of the game. Get off the sidelines and into the game with a course that will teach you more than 14 different and easy to start methods any sports fan, even ones with little to no experience in writing, podcasting, video production, collectibles, or marketing, can use to make a steady part-time or full-time income. All you need is the internet, a computer, a passion for sports, and a few hours a week. Go to sportssidehustle.com to get the absolutely free startup guide that will explain 4 keys to unlocking this income opportunity. Again, that's sportssidehustle.com and get started today. Moving on to the second half of the show, obviously, the Maple Leafs have been reported in the market to try and maybe bulk up their top 6, especially on the left wing side. It's unfortunate Nick Robertson had his chances, got injured. But now, since before the break, we may have a new contestant coming into the rings and trying to show the Maple Leafs that he deserves more time in the top six. And that is Calle Jarnkrok. And if you haven't followed me on Twitter, I gave him the nickname Killer Croc. If you know Suicide Squad or the DC universe, awesome. Now that we got that little side note nerd, trivia out of the way. Shane, obviously, Jarnkrok started off in that depth role. We saw him in the top six in the preseason. We're seeing him develop that chemistry with Tavares and Marner right now. Obviously, this is probably a temporary fix, but what are your takes from Jarnkrok in the top six? And I'm going to ask that question. Do they still need to go after a top six forward?
I don't necessarily think they absolutely need to, but if somebody falls upon their lap, then great. And then that way Jarnkrok can get pushed down a bit. I'm still kind of surprised for somebody that plays, power play and penalty kill. He's only averaging like just over 13 minutes a night. And like, that's almost 7 minutes less than Marner. So it's kind of crazy that he's moved up and got more ice time, but still only averaging that much. But he's been productive as late. He works hard. He's a hardworking guy. He's a crash and bang. He's not afraid to get in there and muck it up. And I think that's mostly what Tavares and Marner need, is just a good forechecker that's going to go get the puck. And he's shown the ability to finish. Like he scored that nice goal. I think it was against Philly where Marner saw him with that cross seam pass. And if he's able to do that and consistently finish those chances, he's not going anywhere. And for like $2 million and change, like, it's great value. So, and he signed for like 3 more years too, right? So this could be a great fit. So I think he's gonna, as far as Keefe goes, he's gonna let it ride for now. Why wouldn't he? The production's been there, and as long as he's defensively sound too, because as much as Marner and Tavares get talked about on their offensive side, and with Marner with the defensive side, they need a defensive minded winger over there. So as long as he can kind of bring those tangibles to the group and continue to push those guys and produce and keep the puck out of their own net, then he's going to stay there. And if that's the case, it allows Dubas to kind of get a little bit more creative when it comes to either improving the bottom six or adding maybe a top 4 defenseman.
And that's why he's very versatile too, is because he's able to move up and down the lineup when needed. And when they needed a top 6 forward to try and get someone going, they immediately went to Jarnkrok. And after that first game against the Minnesota Wild, obviously I was a big fan of that signing before. As soon as I saw him in that top 6 role, I kind of got a little bit excited, and I was like rooting for him, because you never see that, especially knowing how much of a depth or a key depth piece he's going to be. And I just saw a clip of that goal against Philadelphia again on the bottom of my screen. Fantastic by Marner. And he had the smarts and whereabouts to go to the front of the net and get wide open and just hammer that puck home. He does have that two-way ability. And I believe they even mentioned it on the broadcast, how, he plays that Michael Bunting type of style, maybe not as, tenacious and more of a thorn in people or players' sides, with his antics, agitation, whatever you want to call it, but he's still effective, getting in on the forecheck, establishing that, getting good body positioning, and even attacking the net. We've even seen him get a few good looks, even when he doesn't score. He's still a factor offensively nonstop. And, like you said, 13 minutes, when he's playing in every single situation, in every single role, that to me is really effective. And if he's able to try and not necessarily surpass last season's totals, because the most that he's had in a season point total wise was 34 points, and that was back in 2019-20. 20 right now, so that is manageable. He is on pace for 38 points, possible to try and set career highs as well. So we'll see where that's going to go, but I have been absolutely happy with his production, or just his play overall in the top 6. And it may not lead to, like I said, consistent production, but he's effective. And that's the main important thing. Just like Bunting, he may get points, but he may not be as high as Matthews, Marner, and Nylander, whoever Matthews plays with. but they are effective in what they do as a role player, and it shows on the ice. And that is a great sign for the Maple Leafs. Obviously, maybe not a full permanent fix, but if they do go out for a top 6 forward, and if something happens, you could always rotate Jarnkrok in no matter what.
Yeah, and two, if he's going to stay there, then I think they need to upgrade on Engvall on the third line, because to me that's where Jarnkrok would be best suited, as we've mentioned, previously before. So if he's staying there, that's great, but I do think they would need to kind of find a little bit more of a tenacious fit on that third line and have more of a shutdown line there. I'm just not a big fan of Engvall's game, as I've kind of mentioned that a few times. But
although Engvall's play has kind of picked up as of late, so there is that plus. But I do think that because of his inconsistencies and his ability to, fade in and out at times, you might want to try and find a more replaceable option for him. And he is going to be a free agent at the end of this season. And if they're not going to be able to sign him, then, you may want to try and move him, because let's face it, do you really want to try and have that faith in someone who could just disappear at times and then show up? It's not really ideal. And I will say that they do have a better option with Jarnkrok to move up and down that spot. And he could be that, permanent replacement for Engvall if they do get a top 6. So we'll see what happens. At this point, it's all just speculation and guessing games. But I think we could agree that Jarnkrok is playing well. Top 6, middle 6, third line, no matter where, he is absolutely effective. Moving on to our final topic. And obviously we were talking about, maybe some crowded positions or crowded depth with the forwards, how, maybe some changes needed to happen. Players are coming in. We're seeing how effective Pontus Holmberg is. Dryden Hunt has looked really great. The same thing could still be said for the Maple Leafs defense. Obviously, with Morgan Rielly coming back from his injury, there has to be someone coming in and out of the lineup. And unfortunately, one player that I did not want to see was Connor Timmins, but then he was able to come back and he has scored his first NHL career goal against the Philadelphia Flyers. Obviously, Shane, we saw how effective Timmins can be. We see how crowded they are on the left-hand side. They're starting to get some right-hand depth with the play of Liljegren, Timmins, and even Justin Hall, who's looked pretty good during those absences with Rielly and other defenders. But, you still have Victor Mete, Jordy Ben, even Mac Hollowell, who looked really good in his stint. Is there going to be a possible log? I mean, I think the answer is yes, but is there a possible log jam where maybe you got to move out some players, try and add some picks, other depth pieces in certain areas that, can try and alleviate some of that space?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see how it all plays out for sure. We talked about before the break with maybe dressing 7 defensemen on a night here and there. Our good buddy Alex, who's probably still recovering from tailgating in Jacksonville, he mentioned to us about some load management for Giordano, and that could be a good recipe for success down the stretch to keep him fresh for the playoffs. So they got to keep him in the lineup. And because he doesn't kill penalties, and Justin Hall kills a lot of the penalties, doesn't seem like Hall's coming out anytime soon, even though Rielly's back and he does help out with the penalty kills. So it's tough because Timmins is putting up points and deserves to be in there every night. So Keefe's got to do whatever he can to keep him in the lineup, keep him fresh, keep his confidence high. Liljegren's not sitting anytime soon, and the same can be said for Justin Hall. So it makes me wonder what happens with Giordano and if he gets load management. And honestly, too, like if they've been linked to Chychrun out of Arizona, and it kind of like, where does he fit? So who's going the other way there? So I'm kind of wondering about TJ Brody. I know he's a little banged up right now, and he's had a couple of really good games lately, but he makes a lot of money and he's signed to a little bit of term. He's got only a modified trade clause, so he could be moved if needed. But there is a log jam. There's a lot of decisions to be made. So I'm curious to see how it plays out from Keith's perspective on a night to night, and from Dubas's perspective on how exactly he handles not only the surplus, but potentially landing another top 4.
Mm-hmm. And it was Brody that came out of the lineup against Philadelphia, which led to Timmins going into the lineup. So yeah, if it's not Giordano, maybe even TJ Brody too, because he's had his not necessarily long-term injuries, but he's had his fair share of, stints where he's been out of the lineup long-term as well. Obviously, I do agree, especially for Giordano's case, that stretch where he was playing 20 plus minutes a game. Maybe it was just we were all talking about like, hey, this is a guy who can still play at, his prime years. And even when he won the Norris Trophy, years back. But knowing how important this stretch is going to be, maybe you do try and give him some time off, let him regroup and let him get back into things. I do agree that, maybe at some point a move needs to be done, especially for Timmins too. You brought him in to try and give him that faith and that resurgence in his career, and he's making the most out of every single opportunity. Looked good defensively as well, had some hiccups here and there, but at the same time, he is a consistent producer. We see how well he's doing right now. I do think that Dubas said that he is a future player or a future play. So I think that maybe at some point he is going to be a key factor for them. He's only 24 years old. He's starting to scratch the surface with his play with the Maple Leafs. He's finding his groove with everything. But yeah, I do not envy Keefe. I do not envy the management staff because a lot of decisions need to be made. Granted, they are, I believe, at 49 of 50 roster players, 49 to 50. So if they're able to move some contracts, create more space to bring in another player, that's going to be huge. But yeah, the defense is definitely crowded. We were talking about that even at the beginning of the season, how, with the depth that they had, it could be a logjam situation. And we're seeing that right now because, it's definitely a good problem to have. Although there are no marquee names, there are quality names that still manage to do their job and play effectively, especially with two youngsters in Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren. So a lot of upside, a lot of potential, and a lot of promise on the Leafs blue line.
For sure. Defense is like pitching in baseball. You can never have enough. So when it comes to the playoffs and getting injured and guys getting banged up and, one night can't go, one night you can, you're going to need 8 or 9 of them. So it seems like they're in a good position right now, but the most important thing now is just to keep them fresh as we go along here, because let's be honest, these games don't matter. It's what matters come April. And they know that as much as we do. So we'll see. They have a lot of options. And I mean, that's a very good thing. So Dubas has been creative in the past. So I'm kind of curious to see what he's got up his sleeve before March 3rd.
And we are months away, just under 2 months. I don't know. I'm not good with math or projection with that. But you know what? As soon as we know it, trade deadline is going to be here before we know it. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting few months until we hit that mark. So again, like you, I cannot wait to see what Dubas has because it's usually the unexpected. And I think something big is going to happen this time around. Just like the offseason, we're going to expect a big move no matter what.
100%.
That is it for this episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. Once again, be sure to check out Hockeypedia, the go-to source for history, stats, rosters, and everything else NHL related for your favorite team or all 32 teams. If you want to check that out over at the Hockey Writers, as well as Sports Fan Side Hustle. Go to sportsidehustle.com for the free opportunity to try and make an income off of sports writing, media, you name it, anything to get you started and make some extra money. Once again, for Shane Seney, I'm Peter Baracchini, and we'll see you next time on the Maple Leafs Lounge.